I was invited to the beautiful country of Singapore in Southeast Asia to attend Asia Dive Expo, the largest scuba diving trade show in Asia. Besides attending panel discussions and social events, I had the opportunity to act as one of the guest speakers along a host of accomplished divers from around the world. For those who were unable to attend ADEX Singapore this time around, this is that talk.
So, for those of you who don't really know me, my name is Nick. I'm a scuba instructor trainer, tech instructor trainer, and indeed the author of the book Career in Scuba. But why I'm here today is because I also host a relatively sizable YouTube channel called DiveSAGA, and we're going to dive a little bit into that. So, for those of you who've never watched the channel, there's a little trailer here up on the screen. It's not necessarily a gear review or unboxing or commenting on other divers or anything like that. It's really meant to be a mini TV show, 10-minute episodes about scuba diving. And the idea is to try and find unusual locations or unusual activities in dive sites that aren't always accessible to everybody. So we try to make it really positive. There is no commenting on other divers. There is no there is no gear reviews. I wish I could have some of that as well. But the mission is to tell ocean positive stories in locations that are maybe not accessible to everybody, while reinforcing the proper way to do so. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that specifically. We're going to talk about why stories in diving matter and what the art of underwater storytelling is. So we'll dissect a little bit how we make these episodes in a very minimalist way. So this is nothing fancy. This is done with equipment that most people have access to. So I'll dissect the filmmaking process a little bit, especially because it's often in environments that are maybe a little bit more technically challenging. And we'll look at how you can conduct audience engagement, grow a channel, very much like Isidora was talking about. And I'll give you even some tips on how to perhaps start your own. Now, this is actually the episode that started it all, and I'll be showing a lot of little clips from different episodes. This is a place in Italy, near Napoli. It's a place called Baia, where there is a 2,000-year-old Roman city sunken underneath the waves, and this is real. So this is real Roman mosaic floors at 3-4 meters deep, and you can dive those. So this is not me doing really something special because it is publicly accessible. And this really prompted me to really focus on this YouTube channel of mine and try to tell these stories and dissect how do these places exist, how are these places discovered, and what do we know about them. Now, I don't know if you can guess what the most common comment on this YouTube video actually is, but it's both on YouTube and on Instagram. The most common comment is that this somehow proves that global warming is fake. So I say that because I find it very important in all and everything that we make to try to tell positive stories, but to base them in facts and to educate people on things that I think are important. By the way, the statues are not real. They found them, but they replaced them with casts because they were getting eroded. This marble bench is real, so that's actually there. And the dive guides are educated on how to cover and uncover everything every day so that it actually stays preserved, which, by the way, is super courageous of the Italian government to allow people to dive there constantly. I think that's pretty amazing. So this is just one example of the type of stories that you can find on the YouTube channel. But really the ocean is full of untold stories, and so we're going to talk a little bit about how to tap into those. I tend to usually base myself on what I, in my head, call the 3 S's. So I think it's super important for every story to have some kind of scientific basis. As I mentioned earlier, the #1 comment being that this somehow disproves global warming. Later on, we're going to look at an example of a mine dive where people start speculating about the image is artificially generated, for instance. So I think it's super important that everything we make has a scientific explanation of what it is and why it is. I like to also base it around skills. So this is not some kind of cowboy YouTube channel where we go and trespass into crazy places and do a bunch of stupid things. It has to be done in a way that is somehow dive-wise solid. Yeah. So if it's a tech dive, we explain why and how. If it's a cave dive, we explain why and how. And the third S that I like to use is soul. I think it's very important to tell stories that are somehow positive. Like I said, I don't like to do like a channel that only comments on other bad divers. And I like to make sure it ties a bit into science and skills, that it is somehow solid on a foundational spiritual level, if that makes sense. That it isn't just trying to get clicks. We're actually trying to educate people. And I think in a world of like AI and fake imagery and conspiracy theory, it's actually worth going to these places. It's worth showing these places and even explaining why these places exist, how we get there, and that they are very much real.
100%.
So that brings us to the next topic, which is how do you tell an underwater story, right? How do you bring an engaging underwater story? Who here has friends that are scuba divers? Probably all of you. Who here has friends that have come up to you with their 1 hour and 30-minute video of their last scuba dive and wait, but this part is really good and this part is really good. And so that's unbearable, right? Nobody watches that. So I think Isidora, you probably know the statistic better than I do, but like every 1 second, there is like months worth of footage uploaded to YouTube. And a lot of it is that. And so why does nobody want to watch that is because, well, you probably, how often do you even re-watch your super lengthy scuba diving videos? Rarely. So the idea is you have to somehow craft it into a story. As I said earlier, most episodes are around 10 minutes and there has to either be some kind of conflict, being hard to get there. There has to be some kind of discovery, something unique about the location, or there has to be some kind of an emotion tied into getting there, a story that holds some kind of gravitas. You need to structure that into a narrative, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And of course, you need to then post-produce that so that it has some nice soundscape, etc. So this is an example. It's the HMS Stubborn. It's a submarine wreck off of the coast of Malta. But that's just a wreck dive, right? But how do you bring science into this? Well, you start thinking, what is the history of this wreck? Wow, this wreck was actually engaged in the World War II Pacific theater. It actually shot torpedoes and helped sink oil rigs, right? So now we have a story that's actually interesting. So for me, I tried for 2 years to actually do that dive, but the weather, I did like 3 different trips to Malta to try and do this. We kept getting canceled. So that becomes now part of the story, the challenge of getting to that place. And it's at 58 meters, I think, depth. So it becomes a trimix dive, especially in strong conditions, work of breathing. So which gases do we use and why? Now we're educating people on the skills part, right? So once again, those 3 S's are always kind of there. Another example is this, that's actually the most watched episode. It's about Snooty, the lemon shark. So it's a shark dive in Florida. And so again, you get to the challenge. Well, it's a shark dive. There's going to be sharks. How do we make that interesting? Well, it turns out in this particular area is one resident shark. Her name is actually Snooty, and she has a deformation of the jaw, which makes her look really, in my opinion, she looks funny, but some people think she looks frightening. So now we have a story. Now we're going to find Snooty, right? So now we have an objective. We're not just going to do a shark dive. We're actually trying to get from a beginning point to an end point. So yeah, that involves travel, that involves meeting up with other divers, doing research. Snooty, by the way, has her own like Instagram page apparently. We like literally tracked down when she was last seen. And then of course, everything revolves around getting the money shot. So that is, by the way, Snooty. So now it goes from being a simple shark dive to actually something that has, in my opinion, even an emotional component to it, especially because Snooty is such a cutie, if you will. So you can basically find these stories everywhere, right? Wherever it is that you live or that you dive, the first important exercise is, okay, what are the stories in these dive sites? I have a few examples. These are some of the episodes on the channel that you can watch. This is Cueva del Agua in Spain, where there is actually residual diving equipment from real diving accidents. It's old. This is not recent, so the sole component checks out. This was not yesterday. But it does actually help us with the skill component, right? This is an opportunity to educate people on safe cave diving procedures and how we do stand on the shoulders of giants when it comes to things like cave diving. There is an example here. This is in Mexico. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Mexico before, but that's the skull of a gomphotheer, an extinct pre-Ice Age creature. So this is an opportunity to dive into science, right? Where do we find these? When did they live? How did they end up in a narrow cave? And this is actually where I live in Utila locally. We had an actual plane crash. So a little four-seater airplane took off and just immediately crash landed into the ocean. I laugh because everybody survived, right? So I don't think I would have made an episode about that if people would have gotten seriously hurt or worse. But for me, this passes the soul check. This is an interesting dive because, whoa, something happened, but everybody was fine. So this is in very different locations, but it goes to show that you can kind of find stories and relevant background about dive sites pretty much everywhere. You might have to work with local experts, yeah, but you can always find a story somewhere. Now, all of this, I usually use a very minimalist approach. Yeah, so I try to give it the budget or seemingly the budget of a proper TV show, but most of this is shot on action cameras. It's shot with people that I meet, fellow divers, because again, to me, the crux of everything is the story. I have some footage up here to show you. So all of this is shot pretty much on $500 action cameras. For me, the key is you need stable image, you need lots and lots of light. Now, usually this is intended anyway to be on a tiny phone screen. People consume it like this. So normally not like this. It's actually a pretty large screen. So usually I focus fairly little on the equipment and I focus a lot more on the stories and the proper lighting. And like I said, the skill behind it. So what that means is it's actually fairly easy for most of us to try practicing these skills, right? With an action camera, maybe think a bit about the settings, right? They're usually not great right out of the box, but consider whether you're shooting 60 frames, 120 frames per second. Try to keep it stable, right? I think audio is something that's often overlooked. So especially while scuba diving, the audio is usually absolutely nauseating, like the bubble noises and the breathing noises. So we do a fair amount of post-production that way, have a nice soundtrack, have narration over it. But again, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the story. Yeah, we did a couple of mine dives last week in Thailand, and there were some things that I was not able to film, and people said, oh, I only have it sort of filmed vertically on my phone. Doesn't matter. If the story is good, the footage just supports the story, not the other way around. And I think that's actually a common misconception that people have. So how does that then work? Like I said earlier, we do a fair amount of challenging environments. So you do need to plan this. I rarely just go on a trip and like shoot one dive and then yay, now we have a cool story. So usually there is some logistics that goes into this. But we're not necessarily exploration diving. I'm never pretending that this is to places nobody has ever been before. So one good strategy, if you want to kind of get started and you want to get some ideas, I always look whether people have been there before and whether they've already created valuable work. So this is a picture by Alex Dawson. You probably know him. So this is a great shot. So obviously I'm going to look at these shots, look what these places look like, even get some lighting ideas. Yeah, this is photography, we're doing videography, it's different, but you can already prep a lot of your shots in that way. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, this is another example of an episode. It's in Felicitas mine. I'm sure Patrick has been there. I don't know if other people have. It's a decommissioned mine in Germany. But it's consistently at 30 meters depth. So since our model and myself are on open circuit, 30 meters doesn't actually give you a lot of time, and it's an overhead environment, and it's 8 degrees, and the objective of the dive, which was this giant saw blade that's stuck in the wall, is I think 300 meters-ish away from the entrance. So it does take a little bit of preparation. So yeah, it's a deep dive. It's an overhead environment dive. It's a cold water dive, and we're scootering. So this is kind of the final result, gentle recreation maybe of Alex's work, but in moving fashion. But what's important to realize is that that's not one dive, right? The episodes are usually structured as if, oh, we're going to this place, now we're doing a really cool dive. That was awesome. That works because if I say, oh, we're doing a dive, and now we're doing another dive, and now we're coming up again, and we're doing another, that's not a great story to watch. That's very confusing. But I do think it's important to realize these are often 3, 4, or 5 dives or more with a lot of planning, and they're simply told as a singular event. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do episodes of actually exactly what you said is not interesting, like behind the scenes, like everything that goes wrong, everything that.
Do I do behind the scenes where everything goes wrong episode?
Not how everything goes wrong, but like and all these things that are like, oh, we're going now to explore this one dive site, and we see this, and then do another episode of behind the scenes. We actually did 5 dives, and I don't know.
No, I use Instagram a little bit more for that. So I'll often try to use Instagram as the kind of behind the scenes in the stories a little bit. To be honest, for me, either we have an episode or we don't. So, because if something goes wrong, it's still a story, right? It's still a challenge. Maybe we tried to do something and it didn't work. Maybe there's a skill reason, maybe there's a scientific reason, or from a soul perspective, we didn't get what we wanted, right? So last week we were trying to prep some push dives in a mine in Thailand. We're installing a habitat. Suddenly we have an earthquake while we're underwater and diving is canceled for the day. But do you consider that a failed attempt, or do you consider that a really good story, right?
People fight.
So now the reason also that we don't often have really failed attempts is because I plan usually everything in like detail. So for instance, this particular episode, it's actually a team of 4 people. Yeah, even though there's just one model and we don't really zoom into who's all there. Like sometimes we'll plan it down to the minute of you do this, you go there, you stage lights there, model goes there. If you don't do it like that in environments like this, you usually don't get what you want. Yeah, I think we are tomorrow in a panel conversation about shooting on tech dives or difficult dives. So this will come into that. So this is a poor recreation of my napkin sketch, but usually when we do our pre-dive briefings and whatnot, where every light is gonna be, where the camera is gonna be, even where the line splits, where like everything is written down so that there is absolutely no confusion with anybody exactly what we're doing down to the minute. So that you also don't overstay and you don't, you kind of have to be willing to get this close to getting the shot and then turn the dive because it's your time to turn and not get the shot, right? So you were asking, I think, for some behind the scenes, or like this is a little bit of that shot. So you can kind of maybe see the saw blade sticking in the wall here. I'm not sure if that's clear from there, which just goes to show, by the way, that angle is everything. And so we're actually a team of 4. Yeah, there's the model, there's myself, and then there's actually 2 other people who are lighting it. So their only job is very non-glorious. It's just to light it. There's a light floated under here, a little bit overpowered in hindsight. Here you see the model is actually waiting shallow as possible to not acquire too much deco time. And then this is another diver with 2 20,000 lumens lights floating. Here is somebody with 60,000 lumens, a little bit more in the corner. So it's an exact recreation of the sketch plan earlier. So they're floating as high up as possible. And then this is kind of the final shot as it comes out of the camera, and then there is a little bit of color grading. I still think this light probably should have been a little bit less, but yeah, hindsight 2020. But so maybe that satisfies your curiosity a bit for behind the scenes, what that looks like. Yeah. Once you shot all of that, you then need to bring it to your audience, right? So you need to package it somehow. So when it comes to YouTube, I find that consistency is key. Where Instagram is a lot more on like the trying to maybe go viral or hit somebody with a 1 second spark. Here you need to be really consistent in your branding. You need to be very consistent in when you put it out. So we were talking earlier, I do once a week, every Thursday morning. And if you don't do that, and you suddenly change the time even, people somehow don't find your programming. So it's very important to be very consistent with that. Another thing that really works for me anyway is to kind of build a bit of a brand around that. So I actually organize dive trips at least once a year where people can join. Yeah? So we actually do go often to Mexico, for instance. People see the cenote videos, they want to go. This year we went to Malta because people saw a lot of the wreck diving videos and they want to go. So that works really well. And then I did also publish a book that people tend to buy quite a lot. So there's this whole ecosystem that goes into that, not just creating the content. And then luckily for a lot of this, I get a fair amount of brand partnership that actually helps a great deal because it is not super cheap to make these things. So luckily getting, and I'm putting them here just to kind of give them a little bit of a shout out because I do get massive support from them in making that happen as well. Yeah. Sometimes things don't go to plan. So this is indeed, this is me diving with Robbie Schlittner over here. So this is a good example of everything I just said doesn't apply. We don't get to plan anything. It's a one single 3-hour dive, an hour in, half an hour shooting and an hour out. So you can certainly team up with local experts, but I do want to make clear, don't shoot things obviously that are outside of your comfort level or outside of your training level, right? So this is not me promoting everybody to go out in overhead environments, for instance, and shoot content. But this is an example of where I actually just following one diver for an hour, and how are you gonna somehow stage that and cut that into different shots, right? So shoot a lot for one. Yeah, here he's actually holding a pretty powerful light with a diffuser, so we get a lot from that. A trick I use a lot is I always have a second camera that's facing my way so that I can always cut to a different shot if I want to. And so this is in a gigantic underwater chamber, 60 meters deep and 100 meters across. And there is nothing planned about this. So, I mean, the dive is planned, but the shoot, like you do your best to kind of say, okay, when we get to the chamber, we'll kind of descend in a line. But from there, everything kind of goes out of the window and you hope for the best. What saves this shoot is that there's just a lot of light. Like, that's very, very vulgar, but the more lumens you throw at stuff like this, the more light you get. So yeah, shoot more than you need. Make sure to surround yourself with experts, yeah, who can actually take you to these places, and definitely don't go outside of your comfort zone or outside of your skill level. But don't forget to enjoy the dives as well. I think every underwater photographer can attest that sometimes you live dives through a tiny screen, and afterwards you look at that and you say, wow, that looked like a really cool dive. So if you want to get started with stuff like this yourselves, I would say practice the storytelling. I already made that point earlier, but if you don't need big stories, right? If you can't tell the small stories in your dive sites, there is no reason to think that you're gonna be able to handle the large stories. I wouldn't get hung up on equipment too much. Like I said earlier, if the story is right, then it can be shot on a potato. It literally doesn't matter. It's not as interesting as you think. So earlier we spoke about the vast amount of competition there is in the social media landscape. It's the same for this, right? Even when you edit the hell out of this and you put music on it and you narrate it, it's still probably not as interesting as you think it is, because you were there and you see everything around it. For a lot of people, that's just what it is. So you need to keep perfecting your work. And in that, consistency is key. I think every single person who is an underwater photographer didn't start yesterday, right? It just takes a lot to just get better every time. Once again, respect your diving limits. So do not do things that are unsafe for the content. I said it earlier, but you have to be willing to get this close to the perfect shot and turn your dive and not get it. That is, to me, is paramount. Consider what you can give. Yeah, give value to your audience. Try to educate them. Try to make them better divers, and don't think so much about what you're trying to get. Number one question I get a lot is, how do you get the brand partnerships? It's like, well, I actually don't seek them out. They usually ask me, but they ask me because I gave a lot first, right? So I think that is, if you just practice your storytelling, eventually you'll get to a point where it's good enough that people will want you to tell their story. And lastly, I would say love the process. It's a lot of hard work, as a lot of people probably will agree. So if you don't enjoy doing it, you're probably not gonna get there. But if you enjoy doing it and you do it with soul, as I mentioned earlier, it's not even work. Yeah. So there you go. Are there any questions before we get kicked out of here? If there are no questions, then we are going to leave.
What's your favorite part about process of creating this?
The teamwork. I love sitting down, and I love like the plan you saw earlier, which was of course me just putting it in PowerPoint, but we made that like on napkins like the night before, and you strategize and re-strategize on how to get the shot and who's gonna place the light and who's gonna. To me, that's the fun part, because then it's like the whole, I love it when a plan comes together like that. I love that. I love it when a plan, like when it works, and then you look to your screen and you're like, yes, that's what was in here and now it's here. Thanks.
So your main channel is YouTube, but you plan to shoot for different stuff like Instagram or Facebook, or you use the same content and you just repost it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they're two very different animals, right? And luckily now, like cameras have gotten so good, even action cameras, that you can kind of get away with cropping it either way, horizontal or vertical. It's usually the same footage, but I have to rework it specifically. You cannot tell a 10-minute story on Instagram. I don't even think it's technically possible. They are like experimenting with longer reels and stuff like that, but it doesn't work. So usually, in my case, a bit different from Isidora, I usually just take the money shots, like you mentioned, beautiful or something earlier. I usually take the money shots, 10 seconds, some trending music, audio, and then that usually goes not super viral, but it gets like really good hits because of that element. But I don't like super short form, because again, I like the stories and the science and the skills behind it. And in 10 seconds or even a minute, it's very difficult to get that across.
How do people find you? Like, who's your audience?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, well, it helps that YouTube, as you probably know, is the second biggest search engine, right after Google, and they're owned by Google. So a lot of it is from people wanting to go places. So they Google that and they find these videos. Some of them are a bit more heavily skill-based. So a lot of people will look for certain skills and will find it. But it is also, I've been doing it for 7 years. And only in the last 2 years have I really like focused on production value, like storytelling, and try to make it look like $1 million. And that resonates. But it's still, it's hit or miss. Like, and some videos that I think this is gonna do great, and just nobody cares, right? And maybe it was like the best dive ever and super difficult, which I love. And then people are just like, eh. And then sometimes it's a video that I think I would have almost thrown it away, and it works.
In the planning of your videos, do you actually do research in terms of the topics? And I'm asking this because you mentioned Google. Do you do keyword research because YouTube videos are searchable?
Yeah, I try to. I will be honest, I'm not so good at that part. Yeah, I do a lot of research for sure, and I try to make sure the story is solid from like a historical, scientific perspective. But in terms of like maybe how I write the captions and stuff like that, I will admit I'm not so great at that. I should probably do more of that. Yeah.
So all of your videos are 10 minutes long. Is
Ish.
there a statistic on how many people watch how much?
Yeah, and so it's about halfway, because a lot of people click on it and are like, oh no, this is not my style, and they stop. And then there is the people like the hardcore, fan base, watch all of it every time. And so usually what is the term for it? Like the click, when they click away, the watch is about halfway through. But that's just the people who do and don't, decide to watch it. But it's usually all or nothing. It's because, again, if you have a narrative structure, it begs for a fulfillment, right? You're trying to get to a point, you're trying to solve a problem. And this is the same for short form as well. Like successful short form usually begs you need to keep watching because you need it resolved. Or twice. Well, this rarely gets watched twice, maybe by myself. But
It's a fan.
Next question. When you do those projects, nobody pays you to actually go to the place and shoot them. So the way you get money is later by, for example, organizing a group trip to that place.
So indeed, usually nobody pays for this. People will host it sometimes. Like people will say, "Hey, you can come for free." I mean, which is cool, but that you don't live from that. So indeed, there are some brand sponsorships where the brands do pay. YouTube itself, forget it. I mean, to really get a significant revenue stream, your size needs to be massive. So it's a bit partially brand sponsorships, and then partially indeed I do organize the trips. They generate a little bit of revenue. But then, as I mentioned earlier, I am also an instructor trainer. It helps to show that you actually do the thing that you teach. Yeah, this is like a massive testimonial for like, I'm not just here to teach you how to teach. I do these things. I go to these places. I don't just regurgitate slides, right? So there is revenue there. This is not fully profitable. Like, if I hope I didn't create that illusion. This is not self-sustainable at this point. But I'm trying to get there because this is probably where my heart is.
Wow.
Well, I want to say like your presentation is like pretty impressive.
Oh, thank you.
I really like it. What do you use for making it?
Oh, like Canva.com. Yeah, Canva.
What is it?
Yeah, I will tell them. Yeah. Maybe I can get sponsorship. Thank you. Are there any more questions, or are we gonna end with the whole Canva plug? Yeah. Okay, great. Cool, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And am I correct? Are you gonna do the wrapping up? Okay. I'm good. Thank you.